Morning, this is episode 3. This one here is going to go through actually NICRA. I'm just going to split this into two, so I'm going to look at the NICRA and what its aims are first and its origins, genesis. So we're going to have a look and see what this group is all about. Okay, so let me see if we go through and just make sure that you know on the website there are video links, there's quizzes, there's a whole pile of information on this topic itself. Right, so NICRA and growing discontent, what's it all about? First of all, we have to look back at just recapping some of the previous episodes. Remember, since partition 1921, many Catholics in Northern Ireland have actually felt like second-class citizens. And I hope you can kind of remember why. Okay, if you remember those reasons why, it'll really help you in this course. It's kind of the basis of it. So, first of all, there's majority rule. You know that Northern Ireland has a mostly Protestant population, 60%, 65% back then, okay? And that meant that the Catholics were in a minority, and it meant that they could not access political power. There's one big party, though, UP, and they dominated politics. They had by far the majority vote. So this majority rule, Catholics couldn't really influence politics. Secondly, to make matters worse, there are votes. So despite this numerical advantage in terms of demographics and population, things were made worse because votes were actually decided in council elections on how much money sometimes you paid. So the more local rates you paid, the more votes you got. So if you were quite wealthy and had a number of premises, you could actually get up to 7 votes. Now, this isn't based on religion, but you could probably kind of work out that most businesses were owned by Protestants and most premises were owned by Protestants, so they tended to have a numerical advantage on top of their demographic advantage. Okay, so again, that number 7 is important, 7 votes they could get up to. Gerrymandering then is next, so this is whenever you're able to draw on electoral boundaries to suit yourself, okay, and this is very prevalent in Derry, Londonderry, where it's mostly Catholic city, 70%, yet in elections the boundaries are drawn in a certain way that Unionists would actually get a majority, and they had 12 councillors while Nationalists only had 9. Okay, so it's called gerrymandering. You also had discrimination. Now this went on in 2 different areas. First of all, in jobs, there was no jobs legislation like we have now, or fair employment legislation we have now. You could actually ask what religion you were, and in many cases people employed others based on their religion. Okay, in terms of councils as well, councils, there's quite a lot of jobs in that, and a lot of those councils would employ Protestants rather than Catholics. The other issue is housing. Housing was also a big issue as well too. Councils tended to hand out most housing in Northern Ireland, and because most councils were Protestant, they tended to hand out those houses to Protestants as well too. I remember sometimes you could have a vote based on the fact that you had a house, so that it was in their political aims to keep that those Catholics into quite overcrowded housing. And then finally you've got security. Okay, so the Unionist government, despite the numerical advantage, they were strongly suspicious that there were elements in the minority population that wanted a United Ireland and that were prepared to support violence to do that, and that includes the IRA, which would be destabilising. So you have the RUC, which is the police force. It was over 90% Protestant dominated, and they were supported at times by the reserve police force called the B Specials, and they were totally Protestant and had links to the old UVF within that too. Okay, they were kind of quite feared by some of the Catholic population. On top of this, you actually had the Special Powers Act. This was enacted in the 1920s in an emergency, but it allowed the power for the Unionist government to arrest without trial, so they could actually arrest and hold people without trial, and obviously that might be highly discriminatory against Catholics as well too. So these are your key reasons why Catholics felt like second-class citizens. Okay. Right, so where else would you have heard of civil rights? You've definitely heard of this term before, probably in RE, perhaps in history, perhaps just through your own research. And in terms of civil rights, you kind of think of these types of pictures here, okay, where people are protesting in the United States. This here is like of one of the schools in Little Rock, where previously there was no African Americans allowed to go there, and they had to open the school for African Americans to go there, and you can see the hatred in these people's face behind as the students actually marched into school against all this swathe of hatred behind them. You also have this man here, Martin Luther King Jr., is him addressing the crowds in Washington DC, perhaps as I Have a Dream speech, and again highly momentous events in world history. And when is this taking place? Well, it's the 1960s, so you can kind of grasp why this actually would spread to Northern Ireland around the time too. Okay, so what sort of tactics did they use? Well, Martin Luther King Jr. followed the teachings of Gandhi, which all peaceful protests, not attacking people at all, peaceful protests. So marches, banners, lots of people together, and these were reliant on publicity, okay, and getting people's support. You had speeches and rallies. Again, this is the huge one in Washington DC to sort of show the levels of support that there are. You have white and you have African Americans there as well too, and you can see very clearly they all have placards and banners to show what their cause is. That's important for the press. So placards and statements were used in every march that they had to get across the message of what they were all about. These would be used in newspapers. Okay, you can see here, "We Shall Overcome." This is one of the key songs that they sang at the time. And use of the media was prevalent in this. They really did have to use the media as their oxygen to get across their message. Sometimes the way that they got into the media and got the headlines was through violence. They had to try to provoke violence through non-violent acts, so non-compliance with the laws. That might be sitting on a bench in a say one of those milkshake salons in the south and refusing to move. It might be going to the different seats in the bus where African Americans are not allowed, and sitting there in defiance. And what they said was that this was going to lead to people being locked up, but in such large numbers that it would fill up the jails and make the justice system useless. And that's what happened to Martin Luther King Jr. in jail. Protest songs, "We Shall Overcome Again," sung all the way across the United States of America by the civil rights movement and civil disobedience. Okay, Rosa Parks, clearly very respectable middle-aged woman, arrested for sitting in the wrong seat on the bus. Okay, and this picture went across the world of someone who is standing up for their rights, quite rightly. So this is what's going on in the 1960s in the United States of America, and what has been invented is the television. And well, it's invented in the 1920s, but by this stage it's getting really popular, and this is going to go into living rooms in Northern Ireland. Alright, so the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association was set up in 1967, and many people were inspired by what they saw on television. Okay, so Martin Luther King Jr., his process of peaceful reform and change, and they were able to see progress there as well too. In 1967 then, the Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association was set up, NICRA, and it was non-sectarian. Very important for you to emphasise that. Non-sectarian, didn't matter what you were, even the word Northern Ireland within it. I mean, that's it's not a nationalist phrase this here. So Northern Ireland Civil Rights Association, it was not set up to a campaign for United Ireland. It was set up to get civil rights. In fact, it was set up to get British civil rights, the rights that every other British citizen would have in the United Kingdom. So it was set up for that. Okay, so it wasn't a nationalist organisation set up for United Ireland, and it was determined to use the same types of peaceful, non-violent tactics to achieve progress in Northern Ireland. Alright, so these are the reasons it was set up then. So you have the United States Civil Rights Movement. People were looking at that, the non-violent methods, their tactics, even their songs and the placards. A lot of this here was adopted and used in Northern Ireland. The other thing is, back in the 1940s, the welfare state in the United Kingdom actually offered free education for the first time. And if you try to add, say, 18 years onto 1947, you can see it takes us right up to our element of whenever the marches would actually start. So a lot of people benefited, especially Catholics, from better education and further education as well too. By the late 1960s, they're getting more assertive, they're getting more knowledgeable, they're actually realising the rights that they do not have, and they're getting more eloquent and actually pushing their rights forward as well too. And there's growing Catholic confidence as well too. In the United States, not only the civil rights movement going on, but in the early 1960s you have JFK, John F. Kennedy, from a Irish American background, the first Catholic president of the United States, fresh faced, well admired around the world, and a highly personable character as well too. This encouraged many Northern Irish Catholics that they're right to actually stand up and be counted, and that there could be change. Alright, so why was it set up as well? Global awareness. So again, television beamed inequalities into people's homes, and people realised that someone in Ballymena, County Antrim, could find out what was going on in Birmingham, Alabama. So the news spread very quickly of the civil rights movement and its success. Then lastly, the last points would be the discrimination, lack of representation. Catholics really felt they were discriminated against. They had no political voice. They really didn't have political voice because of majority rule, and they wanted to be heard. Okay, many of them felt frustrated with the Nationalist Party in Northern Ireland because the one thing it wanted was a united Ireland. It seemed that civil rights was not as important. They wanted to campaign for civil rights. And then finally, in 1960s, you actually have a Labour government in Britain. Why is that important? Well, the Labour government was actually the Labour Party is much more sympathetic to nationalist ideas and to changes and reforms, so it raises expectations amongst Catholics that change could come, and come quite quickly. Alright, so what's its aims then? You need to know this really well. So the first aim that you have is one man, one vote. Now this one man, one vote doesn't mean just a man has to be said, it's one woman, one vote as well too, but one man, one vote really catches on. Okay, not this here system where you have 7 votes at an election. Cannot happen. Okay, they wanted all people over the age of 18 to have one vote, so it's fair. Okay, the next is to end discrimination. Houses should not be handed out based on creed, that's your religion and background. It should be based on need. Okay, how much do you really need a house? If you've got a big family, you certainly need a house more than if you're a Protestant or a Catholic. You shouldn't have to be a ratepayer as well to own a house to be able to vote. And jobs were also a concern that was highlighted by the Cameron Commission. This investigated the issues that Catholics felt were discriminatory, and it actually did agree that Catholics were underrepresented in government jobs, and this needed to change. So this Cameron Commission was important in showing that they did have cause and they had a right to get change. They also obviously wanted to end gerrymandering, especially in Derry, London Derry. It was regarded as very unfair, and it was very unfair. Okay, wanted to get rid of the B specials as well too. This group they felt should be disbanded, and especially weapons removed as well too. They wanted to get rid of the Special Powers Act. Again, this goes against every element of justice that you could think of. So they wanted to get rid of that, and they wanted an independent ombudsman. Ombudsman's an independent person or group set up to investigate areas of discrimination and to try to adjudicate between the different groups. So they wanted that there to protect themselves. Okay, I have put this up as well too. This is quite good if you wanted to take this down, take a screenshot of it. It is on the website I think as well too. This goes through all the key demands that NICRA placed. Okay, again it's really important you know these. Alright, good. So who supported then NICRA? So NICRA was supported by self-confident Catholics, again JFK, their education. They are becoming really astute to what they needed in society and what they should be given as well too. Young Catholics in particular looked across the waters to Europe and to America. They saw protests happening, they saw change happening as well due to those protests. Liberal Protestants were also involved in this too. A lot of them felt genuinely morally obligated to support NICRA because they saw their Catholic neighbours being discriminated against and they wanted change. Others supported NICRA because they felt, well, look, if Catholics have civil rights, they are not going to want a united Ireland because Northern Ireland would be more prosperous and more advantageous as part of the United Kingdom than part of an all-island Ireland. Okay, and others as well you have also supported by NICRA were academics, trade unionists and communists. Okay, so there's lots of different people, a very broad church of opinions, all rolled into this supporting NICRA. Okay, reactions. Well, the Catholic nationalist community, the Nationalist Party of Eddie McIntyre, seemed to many in the Catholic community obsessed just with United Ireland and not with the real issues like discrimination, housing, jobs and representation. Catholic community widely supported NICRA's aims, no doubt about that there, and they supported their non-violent tactics because before any violence. Liberal Unionists supported it, again because free society, they wanted to remove any demand for Irish nationalism and United Ireland. And Unionists, other Unionists, not the Liberal Unionists but more conservative ones, there was considerable opposition from hardline unionism. Some of them anyway, thought that NICRA was simply a front for the IRA. Really important phrase. They felt that it was the IRA in disguise, and everybody within it they felt was trying to get a United Ireland. That was the real aim behind this, okay, by stealth and deception. Ian Paisley condemned the group, set out to oppose it by having counter demonstrations. So any marches, counter demonstrations. Unionists in O'Neill's own government opposed NICRA and wanted hardline action against them. They demanded bans on the marches and called for water cannon to be used to deter these marches. And these included William Craig. It has to be pointed out that you have a split in the Unionist Party. Some were prepared to see the marches go ahead, other ones were prepared to really counter them, okay? And then you got working class Protestants as well. A lot of those felt that they were disadvantaged in the same way as Catholics were, and they saw that maybe NICRA was trying to be more advantageous to the Catholic community, and that would let them lose out on other things like jobs and other benefits as well too. Okay, right, good. We'll move on in the next video then to 1968, Burntollet Bridge and People's Democracy. Thank you.